Hey, welcome to Watch Complications. I'm Brian. Thanks for joining me. My extremely busy spring has finally started to wind down a little bit. A few things to catch up on, but hope to tighten the gaps between some of my videos. In this one, I am going to show another one of my custom holder projects. I thought this one would be interesting to show because it's a two-piece holder set. Now, I've made sets in the past that have a dial side spacer to lift the dial of movement to a location that the stem will fit correctly in the case and the movement. But this is the first time where I had to actually create a dual part movement holder because of the interior design of the case. So I thought that'd be interesting to quickly show you. If you're new to the channel or just finding it, you like what you see, consider hitting the subscribe button, the bell if you want updates. Check out my website, watchcomplications.com, where you'll find all things watches. I also have a review hopefully coming up soon on the Vario 1945. It's based on the Dirty Dozen. It's a nice little filled style watch, and it's got dual color loomed crown. It's got some cool components to it. So another, I think, good home run from Vario, and that review should be coming soon. But for right now, let's dig into this project of fitting a Ronda 1015 movement. So it's a circular quartz movement into a generic diver case. All right, so as we get started here, let me give you a sneak peek here at the Vario 1945. See, it's got that Dirty Dozen styling to it. It's got its own unique characteristics as well. It's got dual color loom, again, loom crown. It's a smaller watch, 37 millimeter, which is pretty tiny on me, but I've enjoyed wearing it around. Look forward to getting that review out to you soon. But right now, let's talk about this custom holder project. Now, there's some story here. I've worked with the customer that I did this project for a few times. I think I've made like 3 or 4 custom holders for small runs of watches that he makes. We had used this generic dive case before to fit, I think, a Miyota 2000 series movement in it. It's got that quartz shape that you're used to seeing in sort of lower cost watches. And I also did a review on this generic dive style case. Anyway, he contacted me and was like, hey, could we fit a Ronda 1015 in this dive case? And really, this is sort of the niche I love working in. I've actually kind of stopped making full top to bottom custom watches at this point. I really just prefer to do custom movement holders. It's my niche. It's what I enjoy the most, actually, is making some of these custom parts. And so I was like, yeah, sure. I ordered a Ronda 1015-6. That way, if I ever actually want to use it, because the date's at 6 instead of at 3. And I've made the holder to go in this case. And as per my style with these holder videos, I'll go back and forth between this live shot, the CAD drawings, the 3D models, talk about the process I went through to get to the exact specification I want for the holder. Well, we had worked on the Miyota project for this case a few years ago, and even though you buy from the same manufacturer, what inevitably happens with these manufacturers that you'll find across eBay and AliExpress or whatever is, even though they're both 40 millimeter, they're essentially described and marketed as the same case, something about the dimensions will change. You'll probably notice on the still versus the black PVD that there is a difference in the lug width. You can tell the black one's a little bit thinner. There's a little bit more width here between the case back and the edge of the case than there would be on this black version. Well, what happened was even though they're both 40 millimeter, over time they had changed in some regard the dimensions of the case. Not just the external dimensions, but the internal dimensions and the case back design. Again, well, it looks like really similar case backs on first glance actually have different heights. Now, here's a first clue. Look at the height of this edge compared to the one on the black. Those edges are very different heights, right? So there's a clue that there's some sort of difference between them. The other main difference between these two is, so you got the flat surface on the interior, and you can see that it starts to scoop or angle up towards where the threads are, okay, on the exterior. Those angles are different. The diameters are different. So the diameter here is tighter. The internal dimensions of these case backs are very different. So even though I put some work into fitting the Ronda 1015 into this case, that is not what was going to work for this particular customer. However, but if you happen to need a Ronda 1015 holder for this particular dive case, I have the design, and we have it. It's a generic dial I got in there. Don't pay attention to the date because I have the movement with the date at 6 and this dial is with the date at 3, so it's going to be a little wonky and look like it's out of alignment. But here is the final construction. I will show you this first and then I'll break it down a little bit. It is 2 pieces, and I actually created an interlocking mechanism. Now, the movement holder I've got in this right now is black, so it's a little bit hard to see how those pieces connect, but I've got 2 holes cut in the top part of the holder and 2 tabs on the bottom part of the holder, and then we've got cutouts for the stem and some other stuff going on to help it keep secure. And just like you'll see on movement holders coming from some factory somewhere, I put little tabs here on the top that gives you a little bit of a cushion and compression whenever the case back comes down. So I typically put 4 of those around the edge of the holder. Really good quality movement, Swiss made quartz movement. It's going to last a long time. Battery lasts a long time in these suckers, so it's going to be good to go for a while. Let's talk about the movement holder itself. All right, to show this particular part, I've just broken it down to square one. We've got the movement on a dial sitting in the case. Okay, there we go. Just to explain what we're looking at, this brass part you see right here, this is the back of the dial. Then we have this lower section of the movement. Goes around here, there's the stem location. We have dial feet locations that sit a little bit higher. That's going to come into play in this movement holder design. Now, I could take some clippers and trim those off so that they're at the same level as this edge of the movement, but it's easy enough to change the 3D print that it's just not necessary to trim these off. And then we have this raised section of the movement where you can see the batteries on the level. So we've got 2 levels to this movement, and then we've got the dial down here. All right, so first thing I got to do is fill this gap between the beginning of the movement and the interior of the case. Now, the case back is going to come down toward this ledge. You can see right here. And the case back is pretty wide. You can see this is pretty thick, a few millimeters, right? So that's going to sit down between the movement edge and the interior of the case, of course, with the threads here on the interior. So it's going to sit in there, right? Well, in order to bridge this gap, I got to make a spacer to fit in this so this doesn't jiggle about. So you want some cushion in this section here, between here. But the issue is, I would always prefer to make one singular 3D printed piece. And if I had, top tier molding capabilities and could create a custom mold for this, I could maybe make it in one piece. But then the interior of the holder that I have to make has to fit into this flat space, not on this raised edge and not interfering with the interior of the case back here. It's got to sit down in the interior of this without any problems. Okay, well, this diameter at the top and then getting that extended to the diameter at this level and the extended to the diameter at this level wasn't going to happen with one piece. So we got the spacer that's going to go down here to fill this void. And you love to maybe, once that's flat and parallel with this surface, that we can just use some of this space here then to build up the next region that then goes this way, fills up this gap, and then up toward that interior diameter of the case back. Problem is, this is just perfectly fit for the width of this ring, and it like I said, can't have it interfering or hugging too tight, because then the holder will want to rotate with the screwing on of the case back there. And if you're rotating the holder, you're probably rotating the movement, you're going to snap a stem. So I had to make them 2 pieces. You'll see as I put this together that I'll fill up this gap, and then there you'll see just a little bit of that brass, goldish color between the two. Just no way to make that as one piece so that I could get the interior diameter of the holder small enough to fit against the case back correctly. So that's why this had to be in 2 pieces. what I essentially built, let me show you the final version, then I'll talk about the process a little bit, is I've got the spacer that's going to sit and fill that lower gap. It's got some tabs on it that will fit and lock into the movement holder here, these locations, so that will fit in there. You'll see that I've got a few tabs on it. That will go into the stem hole, but not interfere with the stem, but just that little bit of added protection, so when you put on the case back and things start to tighten down, this will just add that little bit more of extra support so that it just doesn't want to twist the holder inside the case. And then I also have these gaps on the bottom side of the holder that give space for those dial feet locations that rise above. All right, I didn't need to cut any extra space for the stem location because this sits above it. And then I've got the nubs on top, and then I've got a few locations here on the edge just to squeeze it in and really tighten it up against the interior edge of the case, so that just anything to prevent it from twisting as you're screwing the case back down as it makes contact with the case back and compresses these little nubs on top. So that's the thing. That's the two-piece holder. Started with the flat spacer, no other elements on it, and just to get the interior and exterior diameters right, so this fits correctly into that space on the lower level. Again, stem location hole there, and then sort of going through the process of, okay, how thick can I make these tabs so it doesn't interfere with the stem? How far do these need to extend? How high do they need to be? That kind of thing. And then on the holder itself, so this one is like, okay, set the dial feet locations and get that part right. Work on the edging toward the inside of the interior of the case back. Again, so this doesn't interfere with it as you're screwing it down. So first I thought, let's build interlocking components of this where it's not maybe cut all the way through the holder, just these tabs, and then those little extensions here would go slide inside of that. What I quickly determined was I need to cut all the way through this to give it really enough teeth to bite down and connect. And so the rest of these holders are kind of following that process. So then what this looks like together, there's the ring that'll sit down on the lower level, and then we have this part of the top that will lock together as so. We've got the stem location is going to come through here, and then these are cut out for the dial feet. You'll see once this is in the movement that there is enough space there for the dial feet to sit between. It's kind of an interesting little design, and these little tabs help that sit flush with the holder so it's all at the right height. It's just kind of the weirdest movement holder combination I've made, but it was kind of just necessary for this particular design. But I don't know if it's clever or not, but hey, you know what? It works. So the way this looks when all said and done, so you can see the little tips there, they're going to go into the stem hole, right? So that'll go in there, sit down nicely. Now this is made to fit in nice and snug, so usually I have to press it down a little bit as I'm piecing this together. There's a dial foot location, so you'll see that for the cut because this sticks up. It's right there on the edge of this bottom spacer. And so what I will do is, you can see the cutout here for that dial feet location. Here's the two connecting points for those tabs. That will fit down like so. Hopefully you can see I'll lift it up a little bit on this side. You can see the tabs are in here. That's the spot for the dial feet. Of course, these cases are meant to hold mechanical movements for the most part. And let me give you another shot of the side of this. We can see the dial foot location. See how that raises up a little bit. Need that location for those. And now what will happen is this is snug. This will refuse to turn. There's a lot of things protecting both components from turning. So as it compresses against the case back, we'll be in good shape. Won't snap a stem. Fits in there nice and snug. And once it's down all the way, you're not going to get rotation, and you'll get a nice snug, no movement on the interior of the case. So that is my latest holder project. A little quirky, but gets the job done. Well, thank you for taking the time to check out the video, particularly my subscribers. I will continue to work as hard as I can, as fast as I can, given the time constraints I have to get new content out. I've got reviews I need to share. I've got custom watch stuff, some tool and accessory reviews. There's plenty to do. I will do my best. But thank you for sticking around. If you're new, consider hitting the subscribe button. Like the video if you liked it. And the bell if you want updates. I'm Brian, I'm out.